I hope you're tuning in from a cool environment this evening. So I don't have any tech help this evening, so I have to be doing everything by myself, which is fine. But we're going to get started, just giving everybody a few minutes or a few seconds more to just jump into the room. Let me make sure I open up my chat. Hot Philadelphia. Yes, I get it. What are you doing to stay cool? Nothing in the Carolinas. You're not doing anything to stay cool. Good evening from Tampa, Virginia State University from Tampa. Let's see here, Cincinnati, Ohio, Fairfax, Virginia. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm not sure what size our session is going to be today, but just welcome in to everyone. Orlando, it's pretty humid in Orlando. I'm actually in Florida right now. I'm halfway between Edward Waters and Bethune-Cookman University, and it is hot, but not as hot as Philadelphia, apparently. So hello, Fort Valley, Georgia. Good to have you. Good to have you. So we're going to get started. And oh, can't do anything. Oh my gosh, but today was better. Yeah, I've heard people say that. I've heard people from New York and other states. But if you have AC, that's a big part of staying comfortable. You might not have the beach, but you might have AC, so that's good. From the Philly suburbs, which Philly suburb is in the house? Maryland. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Let's get started. We have an hour together, and we're going to be talking about resumes this evening. Oh, Bluebell, Pennsylvania. I know exactly where Bluebell is. Close to Plymouth Meeting, close to King of Prussia. I know exactly where that is. Dillard checking in from Texas. Hello from New York. Yes, yes, yes. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to be talking resumes this evening. And so if you've ever sat through a session with me before, or maybe you've never heard me say it before, I ran a resume writing business for several years when I lived in California, when I started working in career centers. And I'd say maybe a dozen years ago, I decided I wasn't going to write people's resumes anymore because I felt that it was the way work was changing. People were going to have to learn how to write their own resumes because of the amount of change that's happening in the workforce. So you are going to learn some of the things from me this evening that is kind of my philosophy behind resume writing. And, I know that one of the biggest challenges with resume writing, and I see it when I sit down with folks in these one-on-one sessions that I do, it's that you become so attached to the document. You've seen the document 500,000 times. So even things that should just be jumping off the page at you, you might not spot, even though you've looked at it over and over and over. And it's not because you're a bad writer. It's not because you don't understand what should go on the resume. It's because you're so close to it. So when we started the 60-minute resume challenge, the whole idea was if you take your resume and you have this kind of external checklist that you can, just go down this checklist and you're going to cover most of the basics. Siobhan is saying that her challenge is people see her as maybe a doer, maybe that's what you mean as a doer versus an accomplisher, and you have no idea what that even means. Yeah, we're going to talk about the difference between, tasks versus expertise versus proficiency, those kinds of things. So let's just get started. These are the easy things. These are the things that I know if you were to just pull your resume, get a clean copy, sit down with a cup of tea, cup of water, cup of whatever is in your glass or your mug, you can go down and you can spot these things very, very easily, very, very quickly. And a tip that professional resume writers use is that they read from the end of the resume, they read the last word, then the second to last word, and they read backwards. And if you're reading backwards, then your brain is not filling in information for you. So you get to see the word as it is. And that's where you're going to spot the spelling errors. It's really easy to do that if you just spend the time and say, okay, I'm going to read it backwards and I'm just going to read it word for word for word. That's where you will spot that you wrote manger instead of manager. You know, those kinds of things will just jump right off the paper at you. The spelling errors. One of the other, this is just a list of quick things that I see all the time. And when I'm critiquing a resume, these are the things that my brain goes to right away. Which dash are you using? Which, you know, are you using the long dash? Are you using the short dash? And that makes a difference because when I, as a resume reader or you know writer, is looking at your resume, those things just jump right out to us. If you read it backwards, you'll spot those things quickly. Which format are you using to write your data or your dates, rather? Let's see here. You don't accomplish, problem is you don't accomplish in entry level roles. Of course, you can accomplish in entry level roles. Of course, you can do that. But yes, with dates, if you're writing month slash day, if you're using the first three letters, if you're using the first four letters, I see people go back and forth between the date format all the time. And between you know, the SCP and the SCPT, SCPT is just awkward. So if you're gonna go with an abbreviation, just use the three letters. So even if it's June and June has four letters, you're still gonna go with just the JUN. Margins is one of those things that I see all the time. Um, and that's a good suggestion, Tamika, to just use years. Here's one of the challenges that we're running into, though, when we're doing dates and we're just doing years, especially on millennial resumes or, you know, people with less experience. They may be changing jobs, you know, every year and a half. So sometimes when you put just the year, the recruiter can look at it and say, well, you know, what do they mean? Do they mean January or do they mean September? Do they have 2 years experience or do they have 18 months? And they might see that as a way that you're actually trying to mask the amount of time. So with the, you know, if you can, the preferred method is to use the month year. If you're talking about experience that goes way, way back, then definitely year over year is fine. Margins is another thing that you can look at the resume very, very easily and spot, you know, oh, wait a minute, why is this not balanced? Why do I have a half inch on the left side? And, you know, looks like I have an inch and a half on the right-hand side. Try not to go below a half an inch because it's very easy for things to get cut off, you know, or fall by the wayside. So margins is something that you'll spot very, very quickly. Alignment of bullets. If you're reading from the back of your resume forward, you are going to see the bullets that do not align. Periods, commas, hyphens. These are things that are going to jump out to you. Is this a full sentence? Should I put a period? Or is this an introductory clause where it's not really a full sentence, therefore I don't need a period? Um, Degrees and certifications. That's one of the things also that when you're reading backwards, you will spot that, or I want you to think about that. I can't tell you how many people don't put the correct names of their academic programs on their resumes. Did you get a bachelor? Did you get a BA? Did you get a BS? Just be clear about that. And that's one of the things that you can spot reading backwards also. Irrelevant content. When you start reading those words, I know your brain isn't filling in, but you will spot things that will make you say, why did I put this right here? This doesn't even make any sense. Oh, I didn't do that in this organization. Oh, I did that in a different organization. Personal information. The only place that you really should have anything that's even slightly personal, and I'll show you in a few slides down, is in maybe your summary of qualifications. We'll definitely talk about AI and to craft your resume. Speaking of degrees and certifications, one can be tempted to leave off dates because of ageism. No question about that. However, you can leave off the dates on your degrees, but if you've done recent, current certifications, then you want to put those, you want to get that 2022, 2023, 2024 on your resume, even if you're choosing to leave off dates earlier. That makes sense. There are some people who will look at it and say, oh, you got your degree way back when, therefore you must be, which is ridiculous, but people do it rather than focus on the skills. But on the other hand, you don't want to leave off all your dates because you still want to show currency. So if you just did a new certification training, you need to use 2021, 22, 23, 24. Personal information, I think I said that's the summary of qualifications is the only place where I'd really want to see you use the I or my or me. Everything else is, kind of written in the third person. Useless words. When you're reading backwards, you can definitely spot where you're repeating words, even in the same sentence. And sometimes you have to just reframe the sentence, write it a different way so you're not duplicating words. Those words are really important when we talk about keywords later on. The density of certain words on your resume is important when you're trying to, apply for something and know that applicant tracking systems are going to be reading your resume. You don't want to use useless words. Every single word that's on your resume should mean something. It should be adding to your candidacy for this position. Spaces, definitely you'll spot those when you're reading backwards also. No longer necessary to use two spaces behind periods. That is something that actually does age a resume. I was trained that way to use two spaces. And so it's hard for me to sometimes remember, but I have other people read stuff that I write and they'll say, oh, yeah, and there are tools you can use to just make sure you're using one space. Listing references, I still see that. People still do that. You can have a reference page, but do not send it over with your resume just automatically. And do not list it on your resume. Because I imagine that all of us have different people who could be references for different things. So we don't need to list a list, put a list of our 5 references that we don't want anybody talking to our references before they talk to us. Graphics and photos. Somebody mentioned AI in the chat earlier. Graphics and photos really can make a mess of the resume. When lots of applicant tracking systems don't pick them up. Now, if you are sure that the company that you're applying to or the position you're applying for has no applicant tracking system in place, which is very, very possible. It's not every company that has applicant tracking systems in place. And you wanted to use text boxes or, columns, feel free to do that. But you always have to have a version of your resume that is without the graphics. It's just plain text. You might use the asterisk as a bullet or something like that. But I totally agree with what you're saying. You use LinkedIn for graphics and photos. Right on. Perfect, perfect place to do that. The top 35% of your resume, when you're doing this read through from the back to the beginning of the resume, when you get to that top 35%, I need for you to take a break. And I need for you to come back to that resume and then start reading from the top down. Because that top 35% of your resume should really set the tone for what's coming up. And if you're applying for a position, and if there are any recruiters in the audience this evening, feel free to jump in and say it. We read left to right and we read top down. And so we want to see those things right up front. What makes you qualified for this position? And then below that, then I want to see all supporting cast is everything that comes below that. Your address, you don't need to spell out your entire address on the resume anymore. You really don't. Your name, and so it takes up a lot less space than it used to. Simply your name. Definitely make sure you have a phone number, linked, have a link to your LinkedIn profile if you have one, and you should have one. I was just looking at resumes this afternoon, and people had these are student resumes. People had e-portfolios that they wanted to share, and this is a good place to indicate if you're willing to relocate. You can make that be part of that address that you put at the top of your resume. And you don't need to list every job that you've ever had, because the resume is all about relevance. It's all about putting relevant information. I'm a recruiter, and that's exactly what we look for. Don't put your address on your resume. Use your Gmail email, not your college.edu email. Only if you know you have it forwarded. I would just add that to what you're saying, Hyoka. If you know that it's set up in a way for it to be forwarded to someone else, then yes, go ahead and do that. But if you don't have it set up to be forwarded, then yes, don't use your .edu, because a recruiter might be looking for you at the beginning of summer for an internship, and you're not picking up your .edu email. So make sure you forward. Let's see here, listing every job, 10 to 15 years of work experience, right? Well, I have some philosophies that go a little bit different from that's generally what people say. And, I'll say to people, if you were an astronaut when you were 12, that's important information. I don't care how long ago it was. So think carefully about what you're going to leave out, because everything in your background is really what has built you up to be who you are right now. So be very careful about what you discard. If you have solid experience that comes from a certain job that you might have done that is important, I wouldn't say toss away your work if it's less than 15 years or if it's less than 10 years. I have seen professionals who, at the very bottom of their resume, will say something like additional relevant work experience, and there are no dates there. It might just be a few sentences about prior work. If you have the room for it, if you have the space for it, that's one of the ways that you can use. We're definitely going to get to the length of the resume, definitely. Listing every job we talked about, and exaggerations. Exaggerations mean do not say you're fluent in Spanish if you're not. Do not say you're fluent in Java if you're not. I believe that people need to feel comfortable about what they put out there on the resume, and definite. Oh, I love all this chat. Yeah, definitely have different versions of the resume. Exaggeration doesn't help you. It really doesn't. I believe people need to go into interviews, go into positions, being authentically who they are and not overstating what they have. I think you need to always be leaving room to grow for yourself. So, try not to exaggerate. Having said all of that, my overall philosophy, and here I just went through a list of maybe 16 things, and, we're not done. And that's because there are some things that are not so easy to fix that really requires thought. And I'm going to go into those. But my fundamental resume philosophy is just like how resumes do not get all the credit for when you land a really good job opportunity, they should not get all the blame when you don't. I see too many people who spend an overwhelming, amazing amount of time on their resumes and pour everything into the resume. And when the resume doesn't get that response, they start feeling badly about themselves, about their skills, about their job search. The resume is just one piece of your job search. So, as far as I'm concerned, the bottom line is that the best resume is the one that gets a response. But if you don't send it out, you never know if it's going to, it's like fishing. If you never throw in a bait out, you don't know what's going to hook onto it. So my advice is always, spend time on your resume because you want to put out a professional looking document. But don't start beating up on yourselves when, your resume is not biting. And it might be some of these things that we're going to cover later, not necessarily the resume itself, but some of these surrounding issues in terms of job search. I'm going to get to that question, Leandria. So when we move beyond the basics of resumes, the basics of the dashes and the bullets that might not line up, or the misspelled word here or there. And I can tell you that if you have the skills and you have made a sufficient connection to a position, they're not going to toss your resume just because you might have, used the wrong format for one of your dates. These are the things that really, really make a recruiter, consider whether or not they're going to put you in the keep pile for now. If you've gone through sessions with me, I talk about V.I.S.A, your values, your interests, your skills and abilities that must jump off the page to me with the resume. Yeah, Latanya, I know it's not just you. All of us get that way, where if we're not getting the bite on that resume and we feel like we've poured everything into it, then we start blaming the resume and we start spending disproportionate amount of time on the resume, and we start going to multiple people with the resumes, and it's like it sometimes it's not the resume, sometimes it's something else. Values, interests, skills, and abilities. When I look at a resume, I want to get a sense of what that is about the person. And as AI becomes more important, it's even more important that you try to be more human on your resume. Do not make the assumption that humans are never going to see your resume and you're just out there in a sea of data. And I'm going to share some statistics with you later that will kind of let you know that. Involvement, and I'm going to go through a slide on each of these. LinkedIn and social media, page confusion, which I know a lot of people asked about, keyword stuffing, gaps on your resume, technology issues, research, skills and proficiency, summary of qualifications, outstanding observable outcomes, and demographic awareness. These are some of the other factors that can really influence whether or not your resume gets pulled in or put aside. The V.I.S.A one, we call it the real V.I.S.A at the HBCU Career Center because it's about values, interests, skills, and abilities. I remember working with an attorney who was, she was a, what do you call that kind of attorney? Copyright infringement and intellectual property attorney. And she wrote a really, really good resume. But on her resume, I personally knew that this was a person who was a hiker. And when I say hiker, I mean somebody who would go on hikes, 27, 30 miles, who, traveled to different countries and did hiking. And I'm like, why is that not somewhere on your resume? It doesn't have to be big, but it is that thing that is going to set you apart from every other attorney that is applying for this specific position in this specific organization. This organization was all about environmental welfare. If you're about environmental welfare, I might be interested that an attorney who I'm bringing on board is a serious hiker. And that's what I mean when I talk about interests. If you can be an accountant and you want to be an accountant working in an insurance company, or you can be an accountant working in a ski resort. Where would that go in your personal interests at the very bottom of your resume? This is something that you can add, globally traveled for hikes of, 10 to 30, I think it was 10 to 35 miles across, all different types of terrain. It's just that one little thing, but it might be that thing that makes you interesting. And remember, you're trying to look good on paper with your resume. I just handled the recruitment for a staff accountant, and I swear we had over 80 resumes. And after a while, they just all start to look alike. And I'm sure you can understand that. And it's like, this person has accounting and procurement experience. Well, this person has accounting and some HR expertise, payroll, benefits. That's what makes you interesting as a candidate on a sheet of paper. Because, even if AI is looking at your resume, they're hiring a human being. And so you want to be able to just hint at those things that make you different, make you the individual that you are. Janice Bryant Howard, I forgot the name of the staffing firm. It'll come to me before the end, but she, founded African-American woman who founded mega Act One personnel. And, she says, never compromise who you are personally to become who you want to be professionally. So even though you're putting this very professional document, Apple Act One, there you go. Even though you are a professional and you're putting together this professional resume, you still want people to know that there's a human behind this piece of paper. And if, you're not going to get every job that you apply for, but you know what? It's going to be unambiguous who I am when I put my piece of paper forward. Involvement. A lot of people wrap their job search up into just being online, and they don't have what I call an online strategy. There is online, and online is powerful. Yes, you can handle visa and executive summary, absolutely. Online is what everybody talks about, but there has to be an online strategy. And when you think about it, the data here from Novo Resume is that 41% of candidates use job search websites to find new career opportunities. We run a job board at the HBCU Career Center, but even if you're out there on the job board, know that there only 41% of the people who are out there seeking opportunities are really looking for a job board. The other 59%, chances are they have some on-land game that is working really well for them. or it's possible they don't even know job boards exist, which is, a possibility also. But I really want for you to think about how on your resume you demonstrate your unland involvement, whether it's that you're volunteering in a local community organization, local chapter of a national association, even if you're a member of, for example, the Society for HR Managers, where I am, demonstrate that you have an online game also by participating in local chapter meetings, going to conferences. Again, you can do that virtually, but it would be good for you to talk about it being on site, because when you're on site, you're going to be meeting other people. And as much as I hate it and I've fought very hard to try to say to employers, we need for you to democratize opportunities by sharing them widely, which is why we have a job board. People still hire because of referrals. People still get to know about positions because someone told them about a position. So you have to have an online game. The data says that hiring managers spend an average of 7 seconds looking at a candidate's resume. That's not a whole lot of time. And given the amount of work that we put into our resumes, we definitely want to, we want them powerful so that 7 seconds is meaningful. But we also have to be aware, if they're only looking at it for 7 seconds, maybe there's an opportunity for me to meet them someplace else. So yes, I agree with you, Pam. Networking does go a long way. And absolutely, you can include sorority memberships, especially if you're in a leadership role. This is where you're moving from everything being online to, having an online presence also. You can join Facebook groups that have local meetups with people who are in the same profession that you're in. You can actually be demonstrating your thought leadership in your profession through online events. I've met a lot of people who have significant contributions that they make outside of the workplace. And when I look at their resumes, I'm like, what are you not telling me? What are you leaving out about who you are? And if I ask the question the right way, I get people start to tell me about these phenomenal things that they're doing. I was in a session yesterday. Someone was talking about the fact that she formed a soccer league in her neighborhood. What makes you think that that's not something that should be valid for you to share on your resume? Let's see here. Networking goes a long way. Let me see what Leandra has to say. You were sharing an article about post, which has great examples of different types of metrics. Yes. But make sure you are amping up your involvement game and not just be thinking the resume is what's going to get me in the door. It may be your involvement that actually precedes your resume, because they're spending 7 seconds looking at a candidate's resume, and that 7 seconds is up from 6. And, I wrote a letter which got a lot of play a few years ago, where I'm saying, if you're looking at diverse candidates, you can't even pronounce our names sometimes in 6 or 7 seconds. You don't understand what membership in certain sororities or frats mean. So if you're looking for a diverse pool of candidates, please spend time reading people's resumes and not just give it that 7 seconds glance over and move on. But I want to encourage people also to think of your resume as a piece of the game. But there is another strategy that you have to involve. LinkedIn. 70% of companies use social media to research potential candidates. And 87% of recruiters, use LinkedIn to source and vet job candidates. So if you're in the job search market and you're struggling and your resume doesn't seem to be getting you the traction that you want, think about going in and doing some things on your LinkedIn page. We don't ever talk about the length of our LinkedIn page, right? Where we get obsessive almost about the length of our resume. Is it too long? What am I leaving out? What should I include? There is no length issue on your LinkedIn page. So you can put, you know, I'm not saying to go in and use it as a Twitter page or an Insta page, but I'm saying that you can actually expand on who you are. You can definitely show a more rounded persona. For example, on my resume, I don't talk about the fact that I was an air traffic controller and that I, had a pilot's license, went to flight school. I don't talk about that. But at the very end of my LinkedIn intro, I say that I'm a former air traffic controller and pilot who still gets excited about adventure. I can do that on LinkedIn. On my resume, it doesn't mean anything, but on my LinkedIn page, it's another dimension of who I am. And there are skills that I built during those experiences that are such a part of who I am that if you get me, that's who you're getting. So your LinkedIn page, the length of the page, you can put additional information. You can have connections. I'm connected to people on LinkedIn that I, went to high school with, or that I worked at my first job in career centers with. You can stay connected. When you leave your company, you take your connections with you. You don't have to leave your Rolodex, so to speak, in the office. LinkedIn is portable. You can take it where you want. If you move cross country, you still have your connections. You can give recommendations, you can get recommendations, you can join groups, you can demonstrate impact in your profession on your LinkedIn page. You can show your values. The session that I was in last night, I was asking everybody to, if I were to ask you to go into the chat, Madame Aviator, I love that. If I asked you to go into the chat and tell me about what it is that you do for a living without telling me your job title, go ahead. Tell me let me see what you would say in the chat. Tell me how your values are reflected in your work that you do every day without telling me your job title. Reach out to people, work LinkedIn profiles, there's no limitation. Let's see here. Passionate about learning, extinguish fire without water. You see, even senior consultant at a Big Four firm. That's good, but that doesn't tell me about what you unless one of your values is supporting higher, making sure that you're working on projects that have good return on investment, that kind of thing. Think more when you're saying that. Try to clarify for me how that explains your values. It could be the prestige of working in Big Four. That's huge. And what you're doing is telling me about your values. Administrative support, large groups of departments in pharma. So I imagine that if you work in pharma, you care about healthcare, you care about wellness, you advise people in career advancement, facilitate placement of students in psychology graduate program. Do you love it? Do you love that work? Do you love that work? Because when you write about what your value is, I want to see on your LinkedIn page that you're putting balloons out there every time one of your grad students actually gets placed. You love to share information, so that means that when I look at your LinkedIn page, I should see you sharing articles and atting different people to say, hey, you're a public health nurse, you would be interested in this. On your LinkedIn page, you can do that. You can demonstrate what's important to you on your LinkedIn page, help people simplify how they get a software product to market. So if you're job hunting and you're in that space, I'd expect that when I go to your LinkedIn page, I'm seeing you write about, maybe sharing stories about people who have built unique products over time. That's a way to really round out who you are in that resume. Because if your resume gets past that 7 seconds, the first place they're going is LinkedIn. The first place the recruiter is going to go is LinkedIn. Helping students reach their goals, ensuring quality and regulatory compliance in the pharma industry. And why is that important to you, Tasha? That's where you really get to, explain your value is, why do I do this work? What drives me? It's not my paycheck. It's not, yeah, of course, your paycheck. Our professions are going to feed us figuratively and literally, but it's trying to distill those values down to the things that just, make you want to get up and do the work that you do every day. And when you're on LinkedIn, you get a chance to see how your industry is changing. What are the new skills that are, in demand in this field? What events are you going to where they're talking about how your career is evolving? And then I would expect to see that in the information that you're sharing on LinkedIn. If there are new best practices coming out of your big four, then I'd want to see that. What if you're a business major but not using all those skills? I'm going to ask you, Lisa, to tell me about a business skill that you have that you never use. Oh, I love this conversation. When you use LinkedIn alongside your resume, be sure the two are mutually consistent. Absolutely. Absolutely. The LinkedIn page is going to just fill in some of those gaps, but it's going to show you as an active participant in your profession. Sometimes we think a lot about what we're going to get out of our professions, and we don't think as much about what we're putting into our professions as a thought leader, as somebody with a lot of experience who has seen a lot of things change and evolve over time. College prep and dual enrollment for urban youth and first gen, and I love it. Yes, yes. And that passion is what's going to drive you, Tamika. And to the extent that when I look at your resume, I can see that energy, and I don't see someone who is, I'm tired of this work that I'm doing and I'm looking for a new place to be. I'm tired of this work that I'm doing. Instead, it's, I've grown past this work that I'm doing and I'm looking for the next step to grow into. And these are things that when you figure these things out in your head, hopefully it gets reflected on your resume. Pages. I was sharing with you that I was part of a search for an accounting professional. And I got to tell you, the resumes that ended up at the top were the ones that were simple, clear, to the point. The company's looking for this. This is what this person has. Because after a while, the resumes all start to kind of look alike. Make sure you have relevant information on the resume. Everything is supposed to be supporting what you have in that top 35% of your resume. Maybe 3 to 7 bullets for each of those positions that you have. Make sure you're talking about recent accomplishments. You can have a lot of experience, but you need to be zoned in on those things that were recent accomplishments. It's hard to say as employees or as professionals that when we went through COVID, we didn't learn some things, we didn't grow in our careers, we didn't for a lot of people, it brought a lot of rapid change to our work. And so it's in today's environment, it's not hard to look at a resume and see, where people have picked up new skills, new certifications, new tech skills, new ways of doing things, organizational change management, process transformations, workflows that are different. It's not unusual to see those kinds of things. Don't take those things for granted, because it's a good thing that you were able to work through COVID and build some skills. 1 to 2 pages. Recruiters are 2.3 times as likely to prefer 2-page resumes. And this is even now, we're talking about students who are coming straight out of college, because it's possible to have a lot of information that's relevant to share. Let's see, now that we're talking about pages, what about the use of XYZ bullet resume format? I'm not sure what you mean by XYZ bullet resume format. Spell that out for me. 17 years, 7 positions, plus education, volunteer work equals 5 pages. I can't do 2 pages. Are you in research? Are you in education? Because that's pretty much how education works sometimes. I'm going to challenge you to look at your resume and think about the things that you haven't done significantly in the last, I'd say, 5 years. And it might be that you have to have someone else help you look at it. And when they're looking at it, you're telling them or showing them specifically the position that you're going after. I mean, a lot of that can be over on LinkedIn also. X was accomplished, Y by what means X. Oh, okay. That's I talk about it in the way that I prepare for interviews, which is about how to interview like a pro using past personal or professional experiences, talk about responsibilities, reactions, recency and relevance, and what was the outstanding observable outcome. And I translate that into resume writing also, that I want to see strong outcomes on your resume. But in terms of pages, let use transferable skills that's matched the new job you desire. That's a good thought, Kyoka. But I'm gonna go back to Anastasia, who is in HR. HR has changed so much in the last 6 years. Now, I definitely believe that it's possible for you to have a 2-page resume. 3, maybe. 5, if you're in higher ed or you're in research, yes, because they want to see every conference you've ever gone to, all the presentations that you've done. But, unless you were, and you and I can just speak HR a little bit, unless in this job you were in labor relations, the other job you were in benefits, the next job you were in learning and development, unless you were experiencing all of the different areas of HR, I can see where you could do with a 2 or a 3-page resume. Yeah, HR is not the same. HR is not the same. Library science, I can see that being very education focused also. So all the research, the papers, the conferences, the archiving projects that you might have worked on, etc. I could see that, stretching to maybe to 3 pages also. But again, don't forget, as someone said earlier, LinkedIn is a great place for you to add a lot of the surrounding information. But 2-page resumes, it should be easy for every professional to come up with at least 2 pages. And that will give you room to, put some of your personality into your resume. Nedra is saying, I've been in HR for 20 years and used LinkedIn Resume Builder and got it down to 2 pages. So, yeah, I encourage people to keep what I call an inventory of your past. And that's not even everything in there is going to make it to, LinkedIn. I've been tutoring since I was 13 years old. That's in my inventory of my past, but it might be in a story that I throw out, just like I just did it here. In an interview, for example, it's something that I could say, but it's not something that's going to be actively in my resume. I like the idea of having things in other places and surprising my interviewer, making my interviewer think of me as memorable. And I've seen people do that in interviews very, very successfully. Should you have a different resume for each job you apply for? I go back and forth on that. It's not so much a resume for each job as it is maybe, because there are jobs out there with different titles, but the duties are essentially the same. So it would be as close to that as possible without, like, without having to rewrite the bulk of your resume. For example, I'm thinking if you're in a marketing space, is there a little bit of a tweak that you might do if you're focusing on going after a branding position versus a PR position versus, advertising position? And there is some tweaking that happens. But you should still be able to have a solid, strong resume. Again, because people read left to right and down the left side of your resume. In one resume, I might highlight the name of a company versus my job title. In another application, I might highlight my job title over the name of the company. Whichever one is going to bring me closer to the position on the vacancy that I'm looking at. Let's see, cover letter, cover letter, cover letter, cover letter, cover letters. I was in a conference last year, and the overwhelming message out of that conference was we do not read them. So, and I almost got into a fight by saying, so why are you still asking people for it? If you're not going to read it. So, people are just not reading cover letters anymore. But when I get to the summary of qualifications, I'll show you one way that you can kind of bypass your cover letter and still be effective. Research. This speaks to the question about, should I change my resume for every job? If you're doing your research about the company for the position that you're looking for, and you see something that you think is significant, that would make you want to include something very specific on your resume, then absolutely do that. As far as research is concerned, we're talking about researching ourselves, again, our values, interests, skills, and abilities, researching the career, researching the job, the industry. And I recommend using the PESTEL framework. It was developed by a professor at Harvard, and it's a framework that is used to evaluate a company. When you're deciding, is this company a good company, for valuation purposes? And I think it's a good way to evaluate a company or an industry in our current environment. So the PESTEL framework means that you're going to look at the political things that might be going on, economic factors, social factors, technological, environmental, and legal factors that are going to be impacting this, this profession that you're in. For example, if we use HR as an example, 6 years ago when I was doing my dissertation on HR, I was looking at how artificial intelligence was going to be changing the recruitment and hiring practice inside of HR. So I knew that HR was where I wanted to stay, but I also knew that I wanted to focus on how HR was going to impact recruiting. So if you see where a company is moving in a certain direction and you have interest, even though you might have had 10 years in your field, but there's a special little piece of it that's growing in a certain direction, and you have interest in that, that's the kind of thing that will come out in your research. And that's the kind of thing that should be reflected in your resume and in your LinkedIn page. That, hey, I've been in law enforcement for, and this is just an example. If I say I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, but I'm really interested in how they're using facial recognition in law enforcement. If you know that about yourself and you have done the research, and there is a job vacancy out there that speaks to that, then you want to be able to tweak your resume to speak to your interest in that area. Yes, this recording will be shared with attendees. For HR, AI is already there, and we HR professionals better upskill with AI. Yeah, when I did my research, I talked to HR recruiters, HR information systems folks, and I talked to HR executives. And all three groups of people had very distinct feelings about what AI was doing to the profession. And of course, the recruiters were more concerned because they would be on the front line and seeing where, geez, I better kind of get on board with this and figure out how I'm going to use these tools. And I'm not saying that it's going to replace recruiters. I don't think we have those numbers yet to say that, but I'm saying, as with any profession that we're sitting in, we need to be looking at how AI is going to be impacting our profession. This is not the first time we're going at this AI game. We've tried before and moved away from it. And now if you read some of the stories about the actual cost of implementation of AI, the actual cost to even just build these data centers and to cool these data centers, we might actually be running into, other issues. So who knows how far it's going to go. But regardless of how long you've been in your profession, it behooves you to just keep aware of what's happening. And that's a good thing for you to share on LinkedIn, for example, is your forward thinking perspective on how your profession might be evolving. Let's see here. What do you do, Tamika? What do you do when you are ready for a new position? Example, associate director, but I haven't worked in that space yet. I have over 15 years experience, though I'm in education. The first thing I'd ask you is, what specific space do you mean? Because when you tell me associate director, I imagine leading some kind of function, managing some kind of function, and you don't have to have been managing the function or leading the function in education to actually be able to say, I have some leadership skills. They're very, very definite ways that you can do that on a campus. You can lead committees. You can step up and run search committees in education. You can start little programs. There are so many ways that you can augment your paid employment to build those skills for the position that you're going after. Keyword stuffing. Man, we could be talking about this all night. So I still have plenty of slides to go. Keyword stuffing. As I said before, do not assume that humans are not going to see your resume. Not every organization out there is using ATS. In fact, I think I can reliably say that outside of the Fortune, say 100 companies, it's a crapshoot whether or not organizations are using, in a lot of cases, an overwhelming amount of cases, it's still recruiters who are posting one position and doing their very best to try to bring the best person into the organization. But companies that do use applicant tracking systems to screen resumes, or any of the job boards out there, if keywords are not showing up on your resume could be eliminated. I'll use the example of someone just asking about an associate director, Tamika asking about an associate director for a school. I'm expecting to see some kind of leadership initiative, demonstrable leadership initiative, starting things, self-starting. I'm expecting to see those kinds of things on your resume. And if you don't have them, you have to create a plan to go get them in order to build your resume. But keyword stuffing is one of the new things out there, that people think that they can do something like this. They can go into Copilot, which is, like a chat GPT, and just say, give me all of the duties and responsibilities or, behaviors that I expect from an HR professional. Yes, ATS is in terms of format, prefers to do Word and just a plain text document. Just a plain, in some cases, I've heard that they reject PDF documents. So the cleaner, simpler that your resume can be, you can have a nice PDF to hand out, but if you're just putting it up in a system, the way the information comes over, it's like the formatting is all gone anyway. So, but keyword stuffing, you can go and get a list of all the behaviors. For example, if you are looking for an HR professional, and this is just 1 through 9, this list had maybe 25 things on there. And there are people who will take this entire thing and put it in the background of their resume, making the font white. So you won't see it when you're looking at it, and thinking that you're tricking the ATS, machines, and that they're going to pick up on all these keywords regardless of what you've put on your resume. Companies don't like it. It doesn't really work, and it's just a lot of extra work on your part that doesn't help you. Again, be authentic in your job search. If if you're looking at an HR position and it says these are 25 behaviors that we expect from HR professionals, throw them in a spreadsheet and go in there and start ranking yourself, rating yourself 1 through 10 on each of these. And which ones would you say, as an HR professional, these are the 5 things. This is my expertise. This is what I know how to do really, really well. And sell those things. And make sure those things jump out on your resume. For the person who had 17 years in HR, I would expect that when I'm looking at your resume, I'm not seeing the same duties repeated over and over and over from one job to the next. That may be an opportunity for you to use a functional resume versus a chronological resume. Someone asked about that before, and I don't have a preference either way. It's whichever one is going to tell your story in the most, impactful way. That's the one you want to go after. But yeah, when you're thinking about keywords, think about these are the hot words that are in my industry. These are the things that if I say I'm a this professional, then these are behaviors that I manifest every day, no matter which HR position you're going to put me in. I'm always going to be a strategic thinker. I'm always going to be somebody who can go from 30,000 feet down to, right down to the ground and back about 30,000 feet. And I am a person who can implement things and get things done. Doesn't matter which position I'm in, you need to know yourself that way. And so you can find a match between yourself and your profession, so to speak. If someone is asking about emailing Word or PDF, if I'm emailing, I would attach the PDF. If I'm uploading, though, I would probably use the stripped down text version of your resume. Deanna Stasia is saying that she heard a functional resume is not good. Hiring managers do not like them. When I tried and was told the same thing but I only had 10 years at the time. These rules, I chat about this with HR folks all the time when they say, well, I don't really like that. It's not really whether you like it or not, is what's going to be an effective way for you to get information from a person. I would not toss out a resume because it's written in a functional way. And I learned this very early, when I left air traffic or aviation industry and I started looking for jobs in higher education. People in higher ed didn't care, that these were my job titles. What they cared about was the behaviors that I had. So I focused in on my leadership experience in the aviation industry and was able to translate that over to leadership in higher education. If I had just written out what I did as a controller, it wouldn't make any sense to someone in higher ed. So I believe that there is absolutely place for functional resumes. There is place for a combination kind of resume. So that's an opportunity also. So keyword stuffing. Don't use every buzzword that's out there. Try again to be completely authentic when you're putting your resume together, and be aware that, what you have as a skill versus something that you're proficient at versus something that you have serious expertise in. To me, expertise means I do it and I love it and I'm damn good at it. Proficiency might mean, yeah, I can speak Spanish to maybe a level 6. Do I love it? No. And skills mean, yeah, I know how to translate Spanish to English on my phone. So, again, with your resume, be thinking about what is it that I'm sharing? Am I just sharing a list of skills that I have? It makes me think about the person earlier on who said they want to see if I'm a doer or if if I have more than that. That's where you can tell the difference. If I look at your job description in a resume and all I'm seeing are a list of tasks, and you don't tell me, for example, and I'm just going to use a very simple example. Let's say you work in a fast food restaurant, just a simple example that all of us can understand. You work in a fast food restaurant and you say to me, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. But if at some point in that description, you don't tell me that you serve maybe 300 people every hour through a drive-through, or I am in a 45-person seating area restaurant, you haven't added any scope to it. So I can't tell if these are just things that somebody reminds you to do all the time. That's the difference between a skill and proficiency or expertise. When you have expertise, yeah, I'm here, I'm talking to customers and I'm taking those orders, but I'm aware of how many cars are going through the line. And I'm aware of how much revenue we're making because of how many cars are going through the line. That's the difference. And you can see that difference when you read a resume. And remember that expertise is not just experience. Know in your profession what languages, what technology, what are the relevant interests that somebody who is in the HR space, working in a big four accounting firm, what are the things that are in that space that you can talk about on your resume that demonstrates that you have actual knowledge and expertise of the industry? One of the things we do in HR when we're evaluating a job is we look at what we call know-how, and we look at the decision-making function in that job. And, jobs get ranked higher depending on how much know-how and decision-making is in the job. So if you're interested in getting into roles and positions that speak to greater responsibility, make sure you're using those kinds of words to explain the breadth of what you know and what you're doing. And the key thing about job descriptions, which is where you're going to look to see what those keywords are, is that don't think you shouldn't apply if you don't have 100% of what it says. I'm one of these HR people. I have rewritten people's job descriptions. I've been in organizations where we've hired people, they come in, they demonstrate very quickly what kind of asset they are to the organization. They want to take something out. Yeah, I'll be the HR person advocating for, yeah, let them take it on. Nobody else is doing it. Here is how they can grow. Here is how they can get compensated. So don't feel like you have to have everything that's in a job posting before you actually go after a position. And let me just say, we see that sometimes with resumes where people are applying because they're sending in resumes that show them to be overqualified for certain positions. And that's because you might be overqualified for that position. Start sending in resumes to places where it's a stretch for you, but you're going to demonstrate because you're stretched before, you can stretch again. And, I know that can be very disappointing for people to hear that, oh, you have much more than we need. But that should be a message to you that you are not going after. I worked with a person once in higher ed who I hired as an assistant director for a program. And she came in, and within a year, she was the associate director of the program. Then she was the director of the program. And the grant was not renewed. And when she left the institution, she kept saying to me, you're going to get a call about a reference. I've been doing all these references for her for assistant director roles. And I said, you're dean level. Why do you keep applying for assistant director positions? Your work and your expertise is that of a dean. Start a place. Don't list me as a reference for one more position that does not include dean. Well, the first job she applied for as associate dean, she got. And right now she's VP of student affairs at a community college. But that was a person who was applying for positions for which she was overqualified. But that confidence piece that says, well, I can do everything here. Yeah, I want us to push ourselves to apply for the things where, man, I can only do 60% of this, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. Fill in the relevant gaps. And that example right there was one of the gaps that we see in sometimes of people applying where they have more qualifications than the position requires. And we're like, what's the gap here? What am I not seeing? Why is this person applying for this position? Is it they're frustrated where they are? What's missing? Why is this person applying for this kind of role? Maybe this person doesn't want to take the risk. You have to think about the gaps that the recruiter is going to be seeing on your resume, and you have to start thinking about how you fill those in. If you have time breaks on your resume, be clear. I tell people all the time, and I'm seeing resumes with this, especially after COVID, it's very legitimate to put on your resume elder care responsibilities, re-engaging into the workforce. Don't let the recruiter look at it and wonder what the gap was about. We're in a time where it's okay for you to say, I was homeschooling my kids and I'm re-engaging in the workforce. So just think about what the breaks mean and answer that question for the recruiter. Advancement. Think about a recruiter who's looking at your resume, seeing that you've done this kind of work, there is no evidence of certain kinds of things, and now you're looking to apply for this kind of work, not even meeting 60% of it. Recruiter is going to say, I didn't see any advancement or increasing responsibilities in your prior job. So why would I think that you can make this jump? Now, it could be that during that time you were in school working on your MBA or working on a master's degree, but make sure that that is clear. So move your education back to the top of your resume. We talked a little bit about this before. Were you just listing tasks, or do the bullets on your resume indicate the thinking behind the tasks? Why it was important that you were doing what you were doing. Indicate whether you're willing to relocate, you're looking for hybrid, you're looking for remote. And also, one of the gaps that recruiters can see on resumes is, are you really looking, or you're just floating this resume out there? And sometimes that is the case when you've been in the one place for a really long time. Because if I don't see like new education on your resume, I might be thinking, what would make you want to move from here to now come into this? Now, it doesn't mean that you're a bad candidate. It just means that I might be looking for people that more their background and experience more closely align with the position. And the fact that you've been in the same role in the same company for a long time, sometimes people are just testing to see what's out there. And so I'm getting a resume that's not really connecting with the position, and it may very well be just a test. We call those candidates untouchables. My office is only 5 months, so no growth, looking for advancement, trying to get out of EA, went to school, working. Well, I mean, I love to see that we're putting I love to see that we're putting these ideas in the chat that demonstrate that the resume, is not just simply this piece of paper. It's this blanket that lies over our lives and our work and our profession, our vocation. And so there are lots of places for there to be holes in it. You're not going to cover and be perfect for every position, but you want it to be the best representation of who you are. With technology, a lot has changed with resumes. We talked a lot already about how AI is impacting that. But I did want to touch on emails only because it is the most used method to communicate still. So even if I have your resume, I still need to have an email address that I can use, that I can communicate with you on. 39% of talent acquisition specialists believes that it's still the most effective way to communicate. Technology and email, make sure you have a professional address, and make sure you have when you're writing your emails, we touched on cover letters before. What you write in that email is your cover letter. So make sure that that is as professional as it can be if it's going to accompany a resume. Mislabeling files, it happens more often than you would think, where you might have saved your resume as Ernst & Young application 2022, and then you send it over to, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia with the same name. So just, that's an area where people make errors with emails. And one of the things on your resume that ages the resume, I'm not saying it ages you or ages me. I'm a proud boomer. I'm a boomer Gen Xer. But Hotmail, Outlook emails, Bell South, AOL, MSN, all of those emails kind of age the resume a little bit. So I say keep your Hotmail, Outlook, Bell South, AOL, MSN if you've had it forever, like most people, but make sure it's forwarding to something like, a Gmail. When I ask HR professionals, these are just two of the things they said to me. If it's not Apple or Gmail or .edu, I'm going to pause for a second. And Outlook screams out of touch if you're in tech. And again, I'm not saying we need to change who we are, but to facilitate a job search, they don't have to know that we carry an AOL email. I get beat up about Yahoo. I use Yahoo. Kate Kim never had an issue with my beloved Hotmail. Gmail gives a lot of storage updates. True. Just forward it. Just know, recruiters are still people. And I read somewhere they spend 78,000 hours on the phone every year talking to candidates. They are annoyed and tired and overworked, always rushed because everybody wants their people right now. So, they're almost sometimes just looking for a thing to just say, okay, I don't have to read this one. It's not good, but I'm just letting you know that it happens. Technology, we talked about being applicant tracking system friendly. Make sure you're using one of these fonts that is more applicant tracking friendly, sticking with a 10 to 12 point font, 1-inch margins, do away with those graphics and those tables, and keep your resume stored in that docx PDF or text. Use text, if you suspect it's it's a big firm and they probably have some applicant tracking system in place. Go ahead and use as clean as possible. They might still allow you to attach something, so you could do that. Formatting thoughts on the resume, if they read from left to right, what side from to date should be on the resume, left or right. I prefer to keep the dates on the right-hand side. To me, and I think I have a slide with it, and I'll share that in a minute. Let me just. Yeah, summary of qualifications. We talked about the fact that not a lot of people are using cover letters anymore. They're not reading them. And so this is an example of how you can actually put some of one very specific piece of a cover letter into your summary of qualifications. And it's to add a goal to your summary of qualifications. If I read the one that's on the left, 10 years of doing this, 8 years of doing that, managed who learned this or that, made X for Y company, so what? If I go over on the right side, experienced HR professional in leadership roles, advanced communication, coaching, and analytical skills, demonstrated ability, I'm missing a period, demonstrating ability to create and implement initiatives for employee groups. Again, so what? Here, though, you'll notice in the last sentence that I have in yellow, interested in hybrid, remote, for small to mid-sized manufacturing organizations in talent acquisition, benefits, or labor relations. That's a lot of what a cover letter would do. And it's doing that in much less, in fewer words. Outstanding observable outcomes. We used the example when we talked about working in a restaurant, in a fast food restaurant. I need to demonstrate that my work was measurable, it was observable. I used dollar signs and pound signs and percentages signs, and I made a business case for why my role even existed in this organization. And I give some examples on the right, managed a program budget versus managed a $120,000 program budget. Supervised underwriters versus supervise a staff of 15 underwriters. It makes a difference. How do I make this smaller? There. Some workplace demographics that I want you to be aware of when you're putting your resume together. There are candidates and there are recruiters. This is what the workforce looks like right now. 25% baby boomers, millennials, 35%, Generation X, Gen Xers are 33%. Recruiters, the average age of recruiters, people across the recruiting industry, is about 40, 41. Be mindful of who is going to be reading your resume. And it doesn't mean that you're going to, again, not authentically be yourself, but you need to be thinking about, well, what does a boomer think when they look at my resume? What would a Gen Xer be thinking when they look at my resume? And this may be down in the weeds, but I'm saying when you see that position that you really want to know about, um, you know, recruiters are using LinkedIn. You can use LinkedIn also. You can go in and find out who are the recruiters, or who are the folks in HR in this organization that I'm applying for. And maybe I could game the system a little bit by thinking about who is going to be reading my resume. What's important to that person? We know that boomers are going to be looking to see, oh, they stayed in this job for at least 5, 6, 7 years. Millennials who are reading your resume, they might not care that you stayed. They're going to be looking for, well, what have you done for a company lately? I hate that you have to go, Monica. We are way, 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 way over time. You will get the slides. You will get the slides. So I want you to think about who it is that's reading your resume. And yes, this is the answer, the data answer to the question about where you put the dates on your resume. For the quick time that the recruiter is looking at your resume, 80% of that time is going to be looking at your name, looking at your current job title and company, your previous job title and company, and your hiring dates and your education. That's a quick glance. So to the extent that you can make those things pop off the page, I think about putting those things on the left-hand side, because technically the recruiter, they go right across, read that summary of qualifications, and then go right down the left side of the resume. I wanted to share only 50% of the companies that are out there are using ATS systems. So do not assume that you have to be writing your resume because a computer is going to be reading it. In a lot of cases, humans are going to be reading your resume. The average vacancy is open for 42 days. So if you send your resume out and you don't hear anything next week, it doesn't mean that you've been cast aside from the position. Yes, recruiters spend 78,000 minutes a year on the phone, which means they are super, super busy people. And if you have a strategy where you can meet them on land, they're not going to spend 7 seconds with you. They're going to talk to you for more than 7 seconds. So, and your resume comes behind you. That's a much better opportunity to connect. And 88% of businesses say that referrals are still their best people that come into the companies, and that just reinforces that it's really not all about the resume. It's good if your resume is like a trailing indicator, but that first relationship that you make could, they still have job fairs. They still do career fairs where you can meet a recruiter and talk to somebody inside of an organization for more than 7 seconds. So, in summary, diversify your strategy. Make sure you have an unland presence for your resume. Don't just be sitting behind your keyboard. Stay in spaces where hiring managers and recruiters hang out. Go to conferences. Go to career fairs. Use niche job boards. Yes, Indeed is out there, and I don't like Indeed, but do go to smaller job boards like the one that we have at the HBCU Career Center. And there are many ways to look good on paper. There is no one right way to write your resume. And the number one do that I say about resume writing is do stuff. The more you do stuff is the more you have to share. In times of AI, your values, your interests, your skills, and your abilities become even more relevant. That's what thinking people do. This is how we're going to set ourselves apart from what AI can do, is bring who we are fully, our values, our interests, our skills, and our abilities that come together in a complex human package. That's what we're going to bring into the workplace. Writing the interview is the best interview preparation. What you focus on in the resume is what you're going to focus on in the interview. And it's okay to show your humanity. It's okay to say, I had elder care responsibilities, I had child care responsibilities, and it's only one part of the job search. It's not just your resume. So I don't want to see you just agonizing over the resume, not sending it out, not connecting about jobs because your resume isn't ready. It's a document that you can write, and you can, if you've made a connection with a person and they say follow up with a resume, you can get a resume done real quick. All of us wrote papers overnight, in college. We do what we know we have to do. So don't delay exploring opportunities because you think your resume isn't perfect. Where you can get resume help and feedback. There was a ton of feedback in this chat this evening. When we share that, I believe you get the chat that accompanies the presentation. Alumni associations, professional associations, nonprofits like AARP do free resume critiques. Career centers work with alumni. Do the research, get the resume writing referrals, and make the investment. If you tell me you're a VP in a big four accounting firm, or you have a successful career, pay the money, do the investment in getting professional to help you put your resume together, and then don't necessarily fight them, because sometimes we get so attached to our own backgrounds, that we want to keep sharing what we. I was talking to a professional resume writer who told me she helped this person put together a really phenomenal resume. It was 2 pages, and the person came back to her and said, everything I've read says 1 page. Please shrink it to 1 page. And it's like, okay, if you're going to trust me to write the resume, you have to trust me to know that 2 pages is fine for what you have, and it's good for what you have. So go ahead and make that investment. Over the next, for some reason, my assistant shared with everybody that I was going to be doing 15 resume reviews, which is fine. I do them all the time. So try to upload your resume into our job board. That's where we pull them from. And let's see, because what I do is I do a little video for you, and I send it to you via WhatsApp, where you can actually see, changes that I'm suggesting. I just use an overhead camera and do that for you. So yeah, go ahead and put that in. And I think you have to get your resume in by July 3rd on our job board. And I think we had over 300 people registered for this session. I'm not sure how many people actually showed up, but once we send the recording out and people see this, other people will go in and throw their resumes in also. So I hope you're one of the 15, but I want to just thank you for being here this evening. Gosh, we went an hour and a half, and we could still, keep chatting. But I so appreciate all of the real live help that everybody was giving to everybody else in our chat. I'll find more resources at the HBCUCareerCenter.com, search jobs and internships, and connect with me on LinkedIn at Marcia F. Robinson. So I'll see you next time. I think I'm doing an interview session for the over 40 people in the crowd on the 12th, maybe, of July. So I'll see you then. In the meantime, stay cool, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here. Take care, everyone. Let me stop my share. And oh geez, looks like we had about 100 people. So take care, everyone. Just keep putting your best foot forward.